Welcome to BM Sculptures. I'm Blake, and in this video I'm going to do 3 experiments that can change the future of my artwork forever. I'm someone that's never content, meaning that with everything I create I think I could do something better, something more efficient, or something that challenges me in a new way. Each one of these 3 experiments is going to challenge me and progress my artwork to new levels. Let's get into experiment number 1. I've had this idea for a really long time and I'm excited to finally put it to the test. As you just watched, I poured a clear sheet of epoxy and sanded down both sides so I get a better bond on the next step. But first I need to figure out a way to shatter this into 100 pieces. And this quickly became harder than I originally anticipated. That worked! That did work, but there was no way I'm shattering these pieces into hundreds and hundreds of really small pieces doing this. I would be here all night. So eventually I got out the sledgehammer and tried my luck just slamming it on the concrete. This worked a lot better, but it would just shoot pieces all over my shop that I had to go find. So then I eventually got a bunch of these big tubs and surrounded myself with them and tried to basically contain the shatters that just went screaming all over the place. I soon found out that I could use this concrete crack to my advantage, so I put the epoxy right over that crack and angled my sledgehammer a little bit so it would just fracture right along that crack, and this worked way faster than just going straight down on the flat surface. There were some casualties along the way. I did fracture my concrete in a couple different places. So next time if I were to do this again, I would probably go buy some bricks or some big paving stones to basically do this over. But for the time being, this worked and I'm happy with that. Now I'm just kind of throwing everything in water because everything was on my dirty floor. So I just want to clean everything up and check this out. Doesn't it look just like glass? And this is the exact look that I'm going for. I want hundreds of fractured pieces of glass that I'm then going to put in another mold and pour a different color of epoxy into. I really think it's a cool idea if this works out. Let's start mixing some colors. I really want to make this look like ice, so what I'm going to do is get a couple different colors of blue and kind of make like an ice blue, but something that I never would have expected to happen just happened. Check this out. I just mixed a light blue with a darker blue and I got this like brown green color. I have no idea why. I thought it would just make it a little darker blue, but it ended up making it brown. So then I had to get a thicker blue pigment and really add a ton of color to make this an ice-like blue that I was going for. It's definitely not as transparent as I wanted. It's too deep of a blue, but there's really no going back now, and let's just test this out. This does have me interested though. Why do you guys think the 2 different colors of blue made a brown green? I still don't get it. While that cures, let's get to experiment number 2. This experiment is more of a learning challenge for me. This is only my 2nd time working with clay. Here is my very first clay sculpture I've ever done of this hummingbird that's actually in a foundry right now. I'm getting this bronzed for a client, and this is very up to date. I got this picture yesterday from the foundry, and this will be going into patina this week. So super excited with how this one's going to turn out. But anyways, I need to get better at working with clay. Clay is probably the most versatile sculpting mediums out there. You can get it bronzed, you can make your own molds from them, and you can even kiln dry them and just use them as is. For me, it just gives me so many future opportunities that I really want to learn as much as I can about using clay and get as good as I possibly can with it. And because this video is all about me experimenting and learning, I thought I would attempt one of the hardest things to sculpt, the human head and face. Ask any sculptor or even painter for that matter, And I would bet you, if you asked them what was the hardest thing for them to sculpt, draw, or paint, they would all have the same answer: the human face. That's because we're so familiar with facial features. It's in our DNA to recognize subtle differences, so much so that when a baby is born, they can instantly recognize the difference between their parents and the mailman, who could also be one of their parents. Okay, I just made that up, but seriously, remember this sculpture of Ronaldo? The sculpture went viral a couple years ago because it looks nothing like him. But if you actually break down the details of this sculpture, I think it's only a few key factors that make these changes. I think the eyes, nose, and mouth are just really squished in, as you could see with this artist's rendering of what he would look like if he resembled the sculpture. With all this to say, faces are the hardest thing to sculpt, and the main reason of why I wanted to attempt this. You may be noticing that I've only really paid attention to the left side of this face. That's because I have a plan for the other side. This is not just going to be a human face. This is going to be a half human, half alien. We'll get to the alien part shortly. Here I'm attempting to sculpt the iris and pupil of the eye, and it's hard to tell what's going wrong. I just know it doesn't look right. One of the huge advantages of working with clay is you can easily make changes. When I'm doing a wood carving, if I make a mistake, the entire sculpture can be ruined. With clay, all you do is add more clay and redo it. That's why if you want to get into sculpting, I would highly recommend starting with clay. And now I'm going to go back and fix this eyeball, and I'm basically just going to take out the iris and pupil because I ended up liking just the smooth eyeball look best. And once I was happy with that, it was time to start adding some hair. And I could have picked any hairstyle, but I chose this because this is what my reference model looked like. I just found this little reference online, and this is kind of what I'm using for this half of this sculpture. I ended up not liking this eyebrow, so I simply just scraped it off and added another one. Man, I should work with clay more often. Now, it's definitely not perfect and not going to win any awards, but for me, I am very happy with this half of the face. I mean, this is my very first time ever doing a face, my second time ever using clay, and I'm really happy with how it turned out and so glad that I wanted to attempt this. Now it is the fun part. I'm using no references. I'm going to be doing an alien, or just trying to sculpt something that my mind thinks as an alien. I'm going to try a bunch of different things, but I'm super excited about doing this alien half. The cool thing about doing this side is there are no references. No one's ever seen an alien before. Well, you know what? I take that back. If you have seen an alien before, let me know down in the comments of what it looked like, because this is what I think it would look like if I were to see one, but I have not seen one, but I hope to one day see one, and I hope it looks like this, because then I'm right. Anyways, I'm just kind of adding things that I think kind of look cool. Little ridges along the nose, and now I get to play with the ears. You know, what kind of ear would an alien have? What kind of ear looks the best? This is just messing around and having some fun. Maybe he's got some gills or some tubes. I don't know. What do you guys think looks best for the ears? I finally settled on the more pointy, kind of standard alien ear. If you think of what a standard depiction of an alien is, I think it just kind of matches this face better. And here I'm actually using some denatured alcohol because I saw it on a YouTube video that it kind of smooths out clay. I've never done this before, but just trying it out to see if it smooths out, and it actually worked. And here I'm actually doing another thing I saw on YouTube, and someone used this plastic bag to make little lines, and I honestly have no idea what this does. It ended up being the exact same without the plastic bag, so if you know what putting plastic on clay does, let me know down in the comments as well. I have no idea. Last but not least, I make some straight cuts on the shoulders and the base of the sculpture to really kind of make it pop. I kind of like the idea of it all being smooth and then just these really sharp angles on the bottom. Just something I thought would be cool, so I added it in there. And then I'm basically done with this sculpture, and I'm going to move on to the next stage of this experiment, and that is casting this thing. But overall, working with clay is awesome. I mean, there's no mess. I mean, think of if this were a wood carving, my whole shop would be covered in wood. No mess. You can fix mistakes. I don't know why I didn't use clay to start with. I mean, it's such a fun material to work with. And I'm going to be attempting to do a two-part casting on this, where one half, the human side, is crystal clear epoxy, and then the alien half is green. Now, if you saw my previous human skull video, I attempted this, but it didn't work because it shifted over in the mold. This might be different because the hairline actually will hold that side in place. Kind of hard to explain, but hopefully you'll understand once you see it. This is a lightweight urethane plastic that I'm pouring in right here, and I didn't quite have enough to reach to the top of there, so I just added a little cup in there to basically displace some of the material. And now that I'm done with the clay for the mold, I get to basically squish it all up and reuse it. Another perk of using clay. You get to reuse all of this. Alright, let's go back to the very first experiment. It's been over a week now and this thing is fully cured. Let's open this up and see what it looks like. And so far this thing looks really cool. Check it out when you put a little backlight on it. You could see the kind of like ice cubes in there that looks really cool. I do really want to see what this looks like if I did a less transparent blue, but I think for this application, and if I start carving down this polar bear, I think thinning out the walls will really make it show even more. So let's go right into this carving and see what it looks like. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. See when you get it thin, how it really stands out more. You could see the clear epoxy in there a lot more. So now I'm super excited to where if I thin this bear out enough, the whole thing will look like an ice cube. And I'm really excited about that. And I forgot to mention, you may have noticed the clear section on the bottom of that mold. That's just because I poured a thin layer of clear just to kind of hold everything in place and make sure I didn't have any leaks. I'm really going to cut off most of that anyway, and for this experiment it doesn't really matter. Thinking about this concept a little more, I do have some very big question marks. Like, what if I were to do the opposite of what I did? What if I started with a blue sheet of epoxy, broke that up into 100 pieces, and then poured clear epoxy in that? Would that look more like ice? And along the same lines of that, what if you did like black and gold or something to where there's just complete opposite colors that you end up carving through? How would that look? There's really so many different possibilities you can do, but interested in what you guys think. What color combo would you choose and what would you carve out of it? Now, I'm not gonna lie, I carved this thing really quickly. This is nowhere near my standards. This is really just for the experiment to see what the epoxy looks like in there, so don't judge me for my carving abilities on this one. This is just to see what the epoxy looks like. Once I popped the human alien out of the mold, I realized there was a big air bubble under the chin, and the ear must have had some kind of clay stuck in the mold, allowing the ear not to fully form, which meant there was only one thing I could do with this mold.
So I'm gonna do it this part, all greens and aliens are green.
Yeah.
And the eyes can be blue. I think aliens are real. Do you think aliens are real?
I think they could be.
Wait, Daddy, actually this one could be a zombie. And
Half zombie, half alien?
Yeah.
Our half human, half alien quickly turned into a half zombie, half alien, and this will be a great decoration for Halloween next year. Here is my second attempt of pouring this urethane, and this time I rotate it to try and get that air bubble out of the chin. And in doing so, I kind of compressed the silicone together and made a leak. So not ideal. However, this stuff cures so quickly that this kind of sealed up, and I'm just hoping for the best. And I'm pumped. A leak and everything, this thing turned out perfect. There's only a tiny little touch up I have to do from the seams of the mold, and other than that, this thing is perfect. Cut in half, I think this thing looks really cool, and I'm wondering if there's something I could do with both halves. If something would be cool, or if something works with this, because this is basically going to be used just for a mold. And you might be wondering why I don't just run this on the joiner, or why not get a perfectly flat surface here. And that's because when I did the clay sculpture, it wasn't perfectly down the middle. I kind of just eyeballed it, so it's actually not perfectly flat on the ground, so I had to do that. I'm making a two-part mold here, and I'm getting a little bit smarter with my mold making. So here I put in some keys to reference both halves, so I have a really good lineup. So other than that, I just kind of trim off the excess silicone and cut around the sculpture, and then I'm ready for the second half of pouring. If you're wondering why I have blue pieces of silicone in here, this is actually a tip I got from one of you guys in my last video, that I can basically reuse all my old silicone pieces to basically just displace material so that I don't use as much silicone, because if you don't know, silicone is very expensive. I'm gonna put it in the pressure pot and then use some Total Boat Thickset Fathom to do my very first pour. And I slowly started to see the epoxy level recede, and I knew I had a leak. Epoxy was all over in the pot. I cleaned that up, put it in a bag, and I wasn't able to put clamps on this because they were too long to fit in the pressure pot. So I ended up getting a bunch of pieces of wood, trying to wedge this thing in there, creating enough clamping force to prevent the leak from happening. And the moment of truth. No. Oh, gotta be kidding me. Completely empty. This was not fun. If you're subscribed to my channel and have watched some of my previous videos, you know that this is not new for me. I'm upset about it, but this has happened so many times in the past that I somewhat expected it's gonna happen. You're not gonna see me throw things around my shop in rage or punch a hole through the wall. I'm more calm and collected than that, which kind of has a striking resemblance to my baseball career. If you don't already know, before becoming a sculptor and YouTuber, I played for the Toronto Blue Jays organization for 8 years. During that time, and throughout my childhood playing baseball, I realized that there's only 3 types of players. The ones that throw their helmet and punch walls after striking out, the ones that blame umpires and others on their failings, or the ones that just internalize things and think of ways to better approach the next at-bat or the next pitch. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but it certainly doesn't help anything by throwing things and swearing at umpires. And I'm going to tell you guys something that I haven't really ever talked about before. Because I was the type of player to walk back to the dugout after giving up a home run and not show much emotion, I often wondered if other coaches and teammates thought, he must not care. Truth is, I cared more than anything. It ate at me, and I don't want anyone to think I don't care, because I do. So to relate all this back to my shop failures, you may think I don't care, that I just wasted that much epoxy and it leaked out everywhere. But I truly do. It wasted 3 days of my progress. You just won't see any fist holes in my walls because of it. After readjusting my plastic wrap pressure and making a kind of makeshift clamp by those bands, I finally got a successful pour. It just had this tiny little bubble in the chin that I just threw some UV resin on and then hit it with the light. I made sure to spray the whole thing with mold release agent besides that inside, which will be bonded to the green epoxy, and then I shoved it back in the mold. And now it's time to mix up some alien green, and there's no right or wrong here. I'm just trying to get the most alien-like color I can think of, and I immediately poured way too dark of a green. I didn't want it this green, so now I'm gonna, and I definitely didn't want to do that either. I guess that's toast. Now I just gotta add a bunch of lighter green and some yellow to try and lighten this up. Kind of like the bear carving, this isn't really the color I wanted to go for. I wanted it a lot lighter than this, but I think that just means I need to experiment more with pigments and different colors, because this is really something I never do. I'm kind of a clear epoxy person. I really like the clear look, but now I know I need to teach myself a little bit more about adding pigments. And while that's curing, let's go back to the bear. Here you can see how rough of a job I really did on this carving. There is a back foot right there that is way too skinny. I carved off too much material and made a mistake, but this is just for an experiment, and with it being an experiment, I'm also going to experiment with the finish. This is just a UV resin. This is Total Boat UV resin, which is supposed to be, you know, for bonding things, but someone told me that I could actually use it as a finish, so I'm going to try to use it as a finish and see what that looks like. And we do not have any leaks. This is a pleasant surprise, and we'll pop this thing out of the mold, and it looks good. However, there is green that surrounded the entire clear portion of the human head side. Now remember, I used mold release, and that just saved me, because now I can just peel off that section of green. And it peeled off surprisingly well. I'm very happy it peeled off like this. Otherwise, I would have to sand the entire thing. There were a couple parts that I did have to do a little bit of sanding and some finishing work, but for the most part, this turned out really well. On this one, I'm just going to use some spray lacquer for finishing, and then we are on to our third and final experiment. A couple years ago, I carved this rhino out of epoxy and wood, and I used these reference images from Laura, who did a 3D rendering for my sculpture. I then sent this over to Travis at Locomotion Creations, where we worked on the shark together, and he basically sliced this rendering in a bunch of different pieces. He then flattened out all the pieces so I could cut them on my laser, and this whole concept is nothing new. If you just did like a slice sculpture search on Google, you'll find that this is actually very common. I've just always loved the look of this, never really knew how to do it until now. I'm using a mirrored acrylic, and I quickly just used my laser to cut them out, and then I made sure and labeled every single piece because there's going to be a lot of pieces for this. And then I simply got some glue and glued them up, and you can see those little holes there that Travis put in there. Those are reference holes, so you could put a dowel in there, but I found it easy enough just to line up those 3 holes, and soon enough I had my very first half complete. And I already think this thing looks really, really cool. What do you guys think about this mirrored look? So the only problem I ran into is the acrylic is only one-sided. The mirror is only on one side. So on the reverse side, it is the white backing. So I quickly just took a little paint and I just painted it to kind of blend it. Obviously, this is just a quick fix. This wouldn't be a real solution unless they have double-sided mirrored acrylic, but something to think about in the future for sure. Now you may be thinking, you know, this is already out there. People already do this. But for me, this actually has a different application that can save me a ton of time. Check this out. Okay, check it out. As I'm editing this video, I have already started my next sculpture. This is a life-size rangerette. Here you could kind of see my templates. It's basically like a Texas cheerleader for Kilgore College. And so think of this concept. I had Laura already 3D render this. Now, if I send this to Travis to slice, he could have actually given me all the slices. I could have just jigsawed them out, glued them up, and I would have already had a 85, 90% done sculpture in probably one day. This right here is gonna take me probably a month to fully sculpt. I'm doing all the details, facial features, boots, cowboy hat, hair, everything. This is gonna take me a really long time, but if I were to slice that, it would probably take, maybe a week. So that's where I see this being a huge game changer for me, is the slicing of giant sculptures like this. And just like that, I'm ready to show you guys the final reveal of all of these sculptures. And like always, if you want to see me carve something specific, let me know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. All right, check out the finished sculptures. You better believe we're revealing the zombie alien as well. This will be out in full display for Halloween. I wasn't planning on including this one either in this reveal, but I painted it gray and just kind of like the split look. And throw a couple books in there and they become two perfect bookends. What do you guys think? And here's the completed epoxy human alien. Turned out really cool. Something that I didn't anticipate is the reflection of the green into the clear section. So the clear only looks clear when you're looking perfectly straight at it. So something I didn't consider, but I would also really want to see this in a couple of different colors. Let me know what colors you guys want to see this in. Here is the polar bear made with clear epoxy shards mixed with deep blue epoxy. Like I stated earlier, I'm really interested to see what this would look like in reverse. Blue fractured epoxy pieces in clear epoxy. I really wanted to make this look like ice to kind of resemble the polar bear in its elements, but interested to see what other color combos I could do to match with something else I sculpt. Last but not least, here's the sliced rhino using mirrored acrylic. I love the modern look to this and most excited about future applications and how I can incorporate this for life-size sculptures. Also, something I didn't think about until now is how many different materials can be used for this. What if this were all walnut slices or mixed wood species? We could even get into aluminum, stainless steel, clear acrylic. The possibilities are really endless. And if you've made it this far in the video, tell me which sculpture you like best down in the comments.